Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my personal podcast tour of the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. From his origins, Wes Craven seemed the most unlikely of men to become one of the most famous directors and influences in the horror film world. And yet the more you delve into his background, the more it makes sense. Craven had been raised in a strict Baptist church setting in Cleveland, Ohio, to lower middle-class parents who divorced when he was very young. The repression and denial of darker impulses, as well as images of Satan as the purveyor of punishment for sin, haunted him from a very early age. Later in life, in a 1990 interview with Michael Berryman for Cineast magazine, he expressed regret that he had earlier described the church's impact on his formative years, claiming that religion is a normal part of a lot of Americans' lives, and I've never felt the need to deal specifically with it in my movies. And yet, his upbringing informed preoccupations and imagery in his work that deal very much with social anxieties and how delicate social fabric is, how easily the tension within groups can be tested to breaking point. The embattled family in The Last House on the Left, the family under siege in The Hills Have Eyes, the forbidding Hittite community in Deadly Blessing, and even the vigilantes who gather to kill the pedophile Freddy Krueger as the inciting incident in A Nightmare on Elm Street, all attempt to maintain a veneer of civilization, while forces conspire to bring out their primitive, uncontrolled urges to defend what they believe in. A theme which Sam Peckinpah also explored controversially in the excellent Straw Dogs. An event that also had a profound effect on the 11-year-old Craven's psyche was when he awakened from a doze in his family's second-floor apartment to look down at the street, where a strange man in a hat and overcoat looked up at him. The man appeared to make a move to enter their building, at which the terrified Craven woke his brother and they burst out of the apartment armed with a baseball bat to find he had vanished. Though dismissing him as a harmless, drunken bum, the future creator of Freddy Krueger never forgot the potential that an adult could have to amuse himself terrorizing vulnerable children. Craven's first career as a university professor of humanities suited his demeanor of the very quiet academic gentleman, an air that he seemed never to have lost according to the actors interviewed from The Hills Have Eyes. However, when his department chairman at Clarkson College insisted he should apply himself to a PhD or face being fired, he took the advice of his peers and decided that arduous road was not for him. Working in film was what really appealed to Craven. He had gained a new zealot's love for the medium only in adulthood, because until then his religion forbade all but the most innocent of cinema-going. Till he went to college, the only movies he was permitted to see were made by Disney. Suddenly, in his undergraduate days, he was exposed to the intoxication of the French Nouvelle Vague, New Wave, amongst other works, in the heady countercultural period of the late 1960s. Hooking up as an editor with producer Sean S. Cunningham, who needed help with profitable softcore porn films, they realized that horror was a genre that could be equally lucrative. This led to Craven's directorial debut in 1972 with Last House on the Left, as we've already covered. Although to my mind its exploitation of women, crudity of execution, and dreadful performances disastrously mar its underlying themes, it is admittedly an important step in his development as an artist. Admirably, Craven was not afraid to graphically show violence without sanitizing it, and he demonstrated from then on a willingness to deal with unsavory real-world issues even when buried as subtext under overt horror movie styling. This thoughtful, multi-layered approach could only have come from a creative soul who was familiar with the rigors of examining what is beneath the surface in the mind sciences and the arts. Producer Peter Locke urged Craven to consider making a second horror picture. The director was extremely reluctant due to the enormous disapproval his first film garnered wherever he went, even at dinner parties. No one could separate the man from the material. It was only financial desperation that forced him to accept the offer. Craven's debut was produced for a budget of around $90,000, which I'll concede is a remarkable physical achievement. This sophomore project would eventually be completed at a cost of around $350,000, which was only a little more than that of John Carpenter's Halloween a year later. However, Carpenter's masterpiece was lensed nestled in the creature comforts of suburbia. Craven's crew was heading for the grim hardship of weeks in the unforgiving Mojave Desert. What better location, he reasoned, for a return to the theme of primitive nature, eventually revealing primitive mankind, when pushed to the forefront by extreme pressure. The Hills Have Eyes shares a very similar plot to Last House on the Left, but is a much better film, made by more experienced talents in every department, and a director who was growing in skill at putting a vision on screen that wasn't obscured by just pandering to the lowest level of prurient exploitation. Here, the action is centered around a white-bread, close-knit middle-class family, whose motorhome breaks down deep in the wind-whipped desert. They then find themselves stranded and preyed upon by what is essentially their flip side, a gruesome, feral family of homicidal modern-day cannibals, so depraved that they prize the civilized family's newborn baby as powerful food. The inspiration for these gibbering gut munchers came from the legend of Sawney Bean, the likely fictional tale of a 16th-century Scottish clan of incestuous cannibals who for years lured their victims to their cave to be consumed until a huge manhunt led to their capture and equally appalling torture and executions. The irony of the accusers using the same violence in punishment as the criminals did in murder was not lost on Craven when constructing motivation within his screenplay. The cast of both camps give much stronger performances than the motley collection in Last House. The cannibal commune, named after planets, include Papa Jupiter, a splendidly gravel-voiced snarling James Whitworth, Mercury, a short-lived cameo for Locke, Lance Gordon's suitably warlike permed and buck-toothed Mars, an amusing echo of Michael Bentine's mad professor persona from The Goon Show, and Ruby, the lesser, evil token female, Janice Blythe, who already had genre credits in De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise in 1974 and featured also in 1977's The Incredible Melting Man. The most memorable is, of course, the unmistakable, bald, striking figure of Michael Berryman as Pluto. In real life, the bearer of 26 birth defects, including a malformed skull, and a much-liked gentility of personality, Berryman went on to convert his unfortunate beginnings into a long, lucrative career in horror cinema, for which he was always grateful to Craven. Here, he is unsettling, whilst earning a dose of sympathy as the bullied, overgrown child of the flesh-eating bunch. Meanwhile, the civilized family of parents and adult children are weakened by Robert Houston's whiny, not always convincing Bobby, who bears a passing resemblance to a sunny Mark Hamill. He later appears in the sequel, but found his true métier as a documentary director, most notably of the Oscar-winning short Mighty Times, The Children's March in 2005. The strongest player in the deck is Dee Wallace, a horror cult fan favorite from later classics like Joe Dante's The Howling and Cujo. Her high-voltage nerviness gives her scenes an edgy credibility. She was justifiably proud of the fulfilled promise of her early role in The Hills Have Eyes. According to IMDb, she racked up 11 credits in 2019 alone. Honorable mention should also go to John Stedman's grizzled gas station owner Fred, the father of Papa Jupiter. He channels a hard-bitten, energetic bitterness at having innocently spawned this constellation of psychopaths. The actual shooting conditions often felt as brutal as the events on screen. Indeed, Houston recalled that the cast's physical suffering during filming mirrored that of their characters. The desert temperature soared to 120 degrees in the day and dropped to the 30s by night, so they were either boiling with dehydration or freezing. This probably added to some veracity on film, along with an effective documentary feel like that of the superior Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In fact, the set decorator Bob Burns worked on both films, and relished bringing his van of kit to augment the rocky landscape, with those touches of human skin, etc., that garnish the home of any self-respecting anthropophagus and his brood. The last act of the film works well, as pretty much full-on action, as the advanced survivors gradually regress into admittedly quite ingenious primitives. Once Susan Lanier's Brenda stops her grating hysterical shrieking, she retools their car as a spindle to turn a cable that drags Papa Jupiter toward his eventual demise. This follows Brenda and Bobby luring him using their dead mother as bait. Surely Craven could no longer be bemused by his unpopularity over the canapes now. The end is a little too abrupt, with a red-filtered, isolated freeze-frame of Doug as he finishes relentlessly stabbing Mars to death. The Anchor Bay 2-disc DVD edition contains an alternate ending whereby the murders of Jupiter and Mars are reversed, followed by the three survivors joining hands and walking away. Given the choice, I'd actually rather go with the sudden end. The Hills Have Eyes opened in 60 cinemas in Los Angeles, half of which catered to drive-in audiences. The good news for Craven was that the resulting $250,000 in just its opening fortnight, coupled with $150,000 from its San Diego release, put the movie into the black almost immediately. Though he might have felt some ambivalence about his defined place in the industry, Wes Craven's name, though controversial, was beginning to be a brand. It wouldn't be long before his singular point of view forged the first of two colossally successful franchises. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe.